Hey everyone. Our job today is to learn to compare and order fractions. These are the notes over 4G. So let's get started right away here. Comparing and ordering fractions. When looking at different fractions, the most important thing, get that most important thing, is to always have the same denominator in all fractions. So you cannot compare fractions unless you have the same denominator. You want to make sure they have common denominators. So again, if the denominators are the same, like 1/8 and 5/8, so you can see that the denominators here are both eighths, so the denominators are the same here. If they do have the same denominators, like that, those have the same denominators. If that's true of your fractions, okay, if the fractions have the same denominators, then you can just look at the numerators to compare them. So as I look at these up here, 1/8 is going to be less than 5/8. If I had a pizza that was cut into 8 pieces and I ate 1 out of the 8, I'd be eating much less than if I ate 5 out of the 8. So, keynote, the important thing to remember here. All right, star it. If the fractions do have the same denominator, then you can just look at the numerators, the top numbers, to compare them. So remember, denominator is our bottom number, and numerator is our top number. Okay, so if they have the same denominator, we can just look at those numerators to compare them. If the denominators are different, if they're different, that's when we have to find the same denominator. That's called a common. We want a common denominator. And this is where our greatest common factors and least common multiples come into play with fractions. Okay, so you can see here 2/3 and 3/4, they don't have the same denominator. This is thirds, this is fourths, and it's real hard to compare fractions that don't have the same denominators, and so we want to get those into common denominators. Denominator. Hard to talk and spell at the same time. So in order to do that, you need the least common multiple of the denominators, and you can find one that's in common. So we took thirds here, and we listed 3, because 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 4 is 12, 3 times 5 is 15, 3 times 6 is 18. So we just listed multiples of 3. We can do the same thing with 4. We'll list multiples of 4. 4 times 1 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 4 times 3 is 12, 4 times 4 is 16, 4 times 5 is 20, 4 times 6 is 24. And really, when I got to 4 times 3 is 12, I could have stopped right there, because I might have recognized that that 12 was also in my list of multiples of 3. And so that's the smallest number that is a multiple of both 3 and 4, the least common multiple. So we're going to look at the least number they have in common. That's why we call it a common denominator. Okay, the least number they have in common. Now, the numerator's a little bit tricky, okay? So, what we're going to do here is, here's another keynote for us, all right? Whatever you multiply the old denominator by to get the new denominator, you have to multiply the old numerator by to get the new numerator. In other words, since we're multiplying 3 by 4 to get 12, we also multiply the numerator 2 by 4 and we get 8. So 8/12 is equal to, it's the same as 2/3. Over here we multiplied 4 by 3 to get 12, so we're going to multiply 3 by 3 to get 9. And so 9/12 and 3/4 are the same. But now these two fractions have a common denominator, and we can compare them now and also do some of the adding and subtracting that we'll be doing later. So now that we have new fractions with the same denominator, we can look at them equally. So we can see here that 8/12 is less than 9/12. All right, let's do a few examples here. For some of you, this maybe is the first time you're seeing the common denominator. I think for a lot of you, you've had that before. So we want to compare 1/4 and 3/8. Well, we don't have common denominators, so we're going to list the multiples of, I always start with the smaller one, and I'll show you why. I'm going to list the multiples of 4. So the multiples of 4 are 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. I'm going to stop right there because you probably can tell what's going to happen is if I list the multiples of 8, of course the first one is 8 times 1, which is 8. And so I can stop right there because 8 is the least common denominator for fourths and eighths. So I'm going to take my 1/4 and my 3/8. I had to multiply my 4 by 2 to get 8. And so I have to multiply the numerator by 2 also to keep these fractions equal. So 1/4 and 2/8 are the same amount. And then I don't have to do anything to 3/8 because it's already in the eighths form. And now I can compare them. I'm comparing this fraction with the new form of 1/4, which is 2/8. And I can see then that 1/4 was first, so 2/8 is less than 3/8, but we want to go back to our original fractions when we give our answer. So 1/4 is less than 3/8, and that's really our final answer. Everything else was just the work to get there. Let me move my paper up here a little bit so you can see all that I've done. Okay, so let's look at the next one. We've got 3/5 and 13/20. And so we're going to take our fifths and write multiples until we find something that will also be with 20ths, can go to 20ths, can multiply to make 20. So 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 3 is 15, 5 times 4 is 20. So I don't have to do any work with the 20 really, right? Because 20 times 1 is 20. So you can see that 20 is my least common denominator. So we can leave our 13/20 as it is. We'll take our 3/5, and in order to turn our fifths into 20ths, we have to multiply the denominator by 4. So we multiply the numerator by 4 and see that that's 12/20. So now we're comparing 12/20 and 13/20. So we're going to go, instead of writing down 12/20, I'm going to write down 3/5. And I see that 3/5, which is equal to 12/20, is less than 13/20. So again, all that work we wanted to get here. This is the answer we were going for. Okay, now we've got 3 numbers that we want to compare. So we're going to follow the same procedure. You're going to get a common denominator, change all 3 of them into a common denominator, and then compare them. So I'm going to start with 3 and start listing its multiples. 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 4 is 12, 3 times 5 is 15, 3 times 6 is 18. That kind of makes me stop right there, right? Because we've got 18 right here. So I'm going to list the multiples of 9 and see if I can find 18. 9 times 1 is 9, 9 times 2 is 18, so sure enough, there it is. So we can use 5/18 the way it is. That one doesn't need to change. But 1/3 we need to change into 18ths, right? So this needs to be in terms of 18ths. And we saw that up here it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so it's times 6. And 1 times 6 then is 6/18. So we've got 5/18 and we've got 6/18, and then let's take 2/9, and 9ths was 1, 2, so we've got to multiply this both by 2, numerator and denominator multiplied by 2. 9 times 2 is 18, 2 times 2 is 4, so we've got 4/18 there. So you can see 5/18, 6/18, 4/18. So 2/9 is our smallest number because that's equal to 4/18. Notice I'm going back to the 2/9 though, not listing the 4/18. And then we've got 5/18, which is our actual number that was given to us in the fraction. And then finally 6/18, which is equal to our 1/3. So in order of smallest to greatest, least to greatest, we've got 2/9, which is equal to 4/18, 5/18, which is as it was, and 1/3, which is equal to 6/18. And so this is our answer here. All right, so now what I'd like for you to do is to go ahead and try the first section of your second page of notes, and then check for the next video to see if you did them correctly.